The forest echoed a heartbeat that didn't match any of theirs. At first, none of them noticed it. They were too busy navigating the narrow deer trail that wound through the ancient forest, pushing through curtains of damp fern and stepping over roots slick with moss. The air smelled thick, earthy and green, like wet bark and crushed leaves left to rot slowly over centuries. The canopy above was so dense that daylight arrived filtered and dim, fractured into thin shafts that barely touched the ground. Even in early afternoon, the forest felt like dusk. Their boots sank softly into the moss. No birds sang, no insects buzzed, just the quiet shift of their packs, the creak of straps, the slow rhythm of walking. And beneath it, something else. At first it sounded like water moving underground. Faint, dull thump. Then another thump, wet, heavy, slightly muffled, like something beating inside a thick wall. Jonah was the first to stop. "Did you hear that?" Mara kept walking a few steps before turning back. "Hear what?" The sound came again. Thump. This time it felt closer. Not louder, just nearer, as if the forest itself had leaned in. Caleb frowned and glanced around. The trees surrounding them were enormous, their trunks twisted with age, bark cracked and ridged like ancient skin. Moss crawled up their sides in thick patches, swallowing the bases completely. "I thought it was you," he said. "Me?" Jonah said. "Your pack maybe." Something knocking. They stood there listening. For a moment, nothing moved. Then, thump. Mara's expression shifted. "That's weird." The sound wasn't metallic or hollow. It wasn't wood knocking in the wind. It was organic, soft but dense, like something wet striking from inside. Caleb stepped toward one of the trees. The trunk was enormous, wide enough that all three of them couldn't have wrapped their arms around it together. Moss coated the bark in thick, damp layers that smelled faintly sweet and fungal. He placed his hand against it. Cold, still. Then, thump. His hand jerked back. "Did you feel that?" he said. Jonah blinked. "Feel what?" Caleb hesitated. "I thought maybe it moved." Mara laughed softly, but it didn't sound convinced. "Trees don't have pulses." They kept walking. The deeper they went, the quieter the forest became. The trail thinned until it was barely visible, just a faint depression through the moss. The trees grew taller, older, their branches woven together overhead so tightly the sky disappeared completely. The air felt thicker here, damp, heavy, and the sound followed them. Thump, thump, thump. It didn't echo. It didn't travel like noise usually did. Instead, it felt embedded in the forest itself, like pressure in the ground. Jonah began noticing it between his steps. His boots hit the moss. A moment later, thump, boot, thump, boot, thump. "Okay," he said finally. "It's definitely following us." Mara stopped again. The sound came immediately afterward. Thump. She looked down at the moss. "Maybe it's underground water or something." Caleb shook his head. "No current would sound like that." Another beat. Thump. This one seemed deeper, almost thicker, like the forest had taken a breath. They continued walking, but their pace changed without anyone mentioning it. Their steps began spacing themselves strangely. One step, pause, thump, another step, thump. Caleb frowned. "Are you guys doing that on purpose?" "Doing what?" Mara asked. "You're stepping with it." Jonah looked down at his boots. He took a step. Then, thump. His stomach tightened. He tried again. Step, pause, thump. The rhythm was too perfect. They stopped moving. Silence returned instantly. No wind, no birds, no insects, just the thick smell of moss and soil. And then, thump, closer. This time it seemed to come from everywhere. Jonah pressed his hand to his chest. His pulse was racing from the hike. Fast, irregular, but the sound around them was slower, heavy, measured, a completely different rhythm. "Listen," Mara said quietly. They stood there breathing. In. Gradually, something strange happened. Their breathing slowed. Not intentionally, just naturally. Their lungs began drawing deeper breaths. Longer, heavier. And with each breath, thump, Jonah's stomach dropped. "Do you feel that?" he whispered. Caleb nodded slowly. My heart just slowed. The beat came again. Thump. This one vibrated faintly through the moss under their feet. Not enough to shake anything. Just enough to feel. Like pressure moving through soil. Mara stepped backward. The forest answered immediately. Thump. Louder. Not an echo. A response. She froze. "It reacted," she said. Caleb looked around the trees. Their trunks were so close together now that the spaces between them felt narrow, like the forest had quietly closed in. He realized something else. The moss covering the ground wasn't smooth anymore. It rose and dipped in subtle waves. Soft bulges. Long, slow ridges. Shapes that looked almost vascular. Thump. One of the ridges flexed slightly. Jonah stumbled back. "Nope. No. We're leaving." They turned around and started walking quickly. The forest answered. Thump. Faster now. Not frantic. Just adapting. Their footsteps sped up. So did the pulse. Boot. Thump. Boot. Thump. Boot. Thump. It wasn't behind them. It wasn't ahead. It was with them. Matching. Caleb tried to break the rhythm. He took 2 quick steps. The forest paused. Then, thump, thump. Jonah stopped dead. Did it just? The beat repeated. Thump, thump. Their chests tightened. Mara pressed her hand to her sternum. "My heart." Caleb looked at her. "What?" "It's sinking." Another beat rolled through the moss. Thump. Caleb checked his own pulse. Slow. Heavy. Matching. Not racing anymore. Not panicked. Just steady. Exactly the same rhythm as the forest. Jonah shook his head violently. No. No way. He started breathing faster on purpose. Sharp inhales. Quick exhales. But within seconds his lungs slowed again. In. Thump. In. Thump. The forest had a rhythm. And their bodies were adjusting to it. Like a metronome forcing musicians into time. Caleb looked at the trees again. Their trunks seemed subtly swollen near the base. Not round. Not smooth. Just thickened. As if something moved beneath the bark. Slowly. Pushing. Circulating. Thump. Jonah backed away. "We need to get out of here now." But the trail behind them was gone. The moss had swallowed it. Every direction looked identical. Tall trees. Dark trunks. Endless green. Thump. This one shook loose a sprinkle of dirt from a root nearby. Mara whispered, "It's getting stronger." Caleb nodded, because he could feel it now. Not just in the ground. In his chest. His heartbeat tried to speed up again from fear. But every time it did, something inside his body corrected it. Slowed it. Pulled it back into rhythm. Thump. The realization crept over them slowly. The sound wasn't an echo. It wasn't responding to their movement. It had always been there. Always beating. The forest floor shifted faintly beneath the moss. A slow, organic contraction spreading through the soil. Caleb's voice came out hollow. "It's not copying us." Another pulse rolled outward through the trees. Thump. Their chests answered involuntarily. 1 beat later. Jonah stared at his hands, horrified. My heart just skipped. The forest beat again. Thump. His chest corrected itself. Matching perfectly. Mara's voice trembled. "It's setting the tempo." The 3 of them stood in the quiet green darkness as the rhythm spread deeper into their bodies. Breathing. Pulse. Step. Everything aligning. Everything adjusting. Everything slowly surrendering. Thump. And for the first time since entering the ancient forest, they understood the sound clearly. It wasn't an echo. It wasn't ambient. It wasn't even environmental. It was a broadcast. The forest had a heartbeat of its own. Ancient, patient, wet and heavy beneath the moss and roots. And the longer they stayed inside it, the more their bodies stopped remembering how to beat any other way. Their tent was zipped shut with a lock none of them owned. At first Mara thought Eli was joking. He was standing beside the tent, crouched low, his flashlight angled toward the zipper where the two metal pulls met. The beam caught something small and silver hanging there. A lock, a tiny brass padlock threaded through the zipper loops. Mara frowned. "Stop messing around." "I'm not," Eli said quietly. John stepped out from the trees behind them, carrying a bundle of sticks for the fire. "What's going on?" Eli moved the flashlight aside so John could see. John stared for a moment. The lock swung slightly, catching the light. It was old brass dulled by age, the edges worn smooth. The kind you'd see on a locker in an abandoned school. "I didn't bring that," John said. "Neither did I," Mara replied. They stood in the clearing, the three of them, the tent crouched in the center like something asleep. The woods around them were too still. No wind moved the pine branches. No insects hummed. The forest held its breath. John set the sticks down slowly. "Okay," he said. "Let's just think." Mara stepped closer to the tent and crouched. The nylon surface felt cold beneath her fingertips, damp with the breath of the night air. Their two-person backpacking tent. Green fabric, thin poles, barely large enough for all three of them. It had been open when they left. She was certain of it. They'd gone down the slope to refill their bottles from the creek. 20 minutes, maybe 30. When they came back, the tent was sealed. Locked. Eli tried the zipper gently. The lock clinked softly. "Don't force it," Mara said. "I'm not." He tugged again. The zipper didn't budge. John knelt beside them. The soil near the tent caught his attention first. "Hey!" He aimed his headlamp downward. The dirt around the tent was disturbed. Not dramatically, just small scuffs in the soft ground, like someone had shifted their weight there. Knees pressed into moss. A heel dragged through the damp soil. "Did one of you come back early?" John asked. "No," Mara said immediately. Eli shook his head. John slowly scanned the clearing with the beam. That's when he saw the footprints. They circled the tent. Not hiking boots. Bare. The impressions were shallow but clear. Long toes, narrow heels. The shape of a human foot pressed into mud. Except the toes were wrong. Too long. And there were too many. "Guys," John said softly. Mara turned. The three of them looked at the ring of prints surrounding their tent. A slow circle, like something had walked around it again. And again. And again. Eli swallowed. "Okay. Maybe someone's messing with us." "Out here?" Mara asked. They had hiked 6 miles off the last marked trail. No signal. No campsites. Just forest. Eli stood and pulled a multi-tool from his pocket. "I'll just cut it." He flipped out the small wire cutters and clamped them onto the padlock's shackle. The metal felt strangely warm in his fingers. "Ready?" he said. John nodded. Eli squeezed. The cutters slipped. He adjusted and tried again, putting more weight into it. The tool bit into the metal and stopped, like the lock wasn't brass at all. "Let me see," John said. He took the tool and tried himself. Nothing. The cutters couldn't bite through. Mara leaned closer to inspect the lock. It looked old. Soft metal. The kind that should snap easily. Yet the blades of the cutter slid off its surface like it was stone. "Okay," John muttered. "That's weird." Behind them, the forest shifted. Not with sound. With presence. Like something had leaned closer. Mara turned instinctively. The trees were tall and black, trunks disappearing into shadow. Pine needles carpeted the ground beyond the clearing. Nothing moved, but the silence had deepened. Eli suddenly crouched again. "Wait," he whispered. "What?" He pointed toward the tent. The fabric moved. Not with wind. From inside. A slow inward press, as if someone inside had placed a palm against the nylon wall. Mara's stomach dropped. "That's not funny," she said. Neither of the others laughed. John stepped forward cautiously and placed his hand against the tent wall. Cold nylon. Still. Nothing. He exhaled. "Probably the sleeping bags shifting," he said. But Mara noticed something else. Their backpacks were missing. They had left them leaning against the tent. Now they were gone. "Where's our gear?" she asked. Eli turned. "What?" "The packs." They searched the clearing quickly. Flashlights sweeping across the ground. No packs. No cooking kit. No lantern. Just the tent. And the lock. John's voice came out tighter now. "Okay. Someone is definitely here." As if in response, something creaked. Not from the trees. From the tent. The zipper slowly shifted upward an inch. Then stopped. The lock swung gently. Eli stepped back. "You saw that?" Mara nodded. John approached cautiously and tugged the zipper again. It didn't move. The lock held it perfectly shut. Then Mara noticed something that made her skin crawl. The lock was different. The brass had darkened. The surface no longer smooth. Small lines had appeared along it. Fine grooves twisting across the metal like veins. "Was it like that before?" she asked. John leaned closer. "No." The grooves shifted. Just slightly, like something beneath the metal was moving. Eli recoiled. "Nope." The forest exhaled. A cold wind slid into the clearing for the first time since they arrived. The tent rustled. And from inside, a voice whispered, "Mara." She froze. It was Eli's voice, but Eli stood beside her. "Mara," the voice repeated softly, from inside the locked tent. John's breathing grew shallow. "No," he murmured. The nylon wall pushed outward again. A shape pressed against it. A face, distorted through the fabric. Eyes where Eli's eyes would be, but too wide, too still. The voice spoke again. "Let me out." Eli backed away. "I didn't say that." The face inside the tent smiled. The lock twitched. Its brass surface split slightly along the grooves. Inside the opening was darkness. Something wet moved within it. John grabbed the tent pole and yanked. The tent collapsed sideways with a snap. The face vanished instantly. They all stared at the crumpled fabric. Silence returned. Slowly, cautiously, Mara approached. She lifted the tent flap. Inside, nothing. No sleeping bags. No gear. Just the cold forest floor. The lock still hung from the zipper. Except now it was larger. And heavier. The grooves across its surface had deepened into shapes. Symbols. Tiny figures carved into the brass. Little human forms. Curled up. Like they were sleeping. Or trapped. Eli stared at them. "There's 3 of them." Mara's heart pounded. 3 figures. Exactly their number. Behind them, the disturbed soil shifted. New footprints appeared in the mud. Bare feet. Long toes. They formed slowly, pressing into the earth as if invisible weight stepped there. One step. Another. Circling the tent again. The lock clicked. Not open. Closed. And the zipper pulled itself tight, sealing the empty tent once more. The carvings on the lock changed. Now there were 4 small figures. Inside. John was the first to realize. He looked up at the woods. The footprints stopped just beyond the clearing. Something stood there, watching, waiting for the next campers to arrive, waiting for someone curious enough to open the tent and try to remove the lock.